From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, December 13th, a Friday the 13th episode of the HPS Macrocast. Tony Fratto, I'm here in the studio in Washington, D.C. with John Fagan and Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners. And as we sit here at 9:41 or so on Friday morning, we're expecting a 10 a.m. Press conference from the Chinese on what may or may not be a phase one, an agreement on a phase one trade deal, and it's safe to say that almost nobody knows. They're getting conflicting signals or silence from the American side. We're getting conflicting signals or silence on the Chinese side. There's no Chinese press reports indicating that an agreement is at hand. But we have had reporting from the really excellent reporters of the Wall Street Journal, Bob Davis and Lele Wang from Beijing, saying that phase one deal is essentially the Chinese buying lots of stuff, mostly agricultural products, $50 billion or so worth over 2020 and 2021. And no imposition of the expected December 15th tariffs, and they what they called a 50% rollback of some set of existing tariffs. And I can't remember if they said up to 50% or 50%, and
right on about $375 billion of the already in place tariffs.
Okay,
that was the report.
However, that was the report. However, drama, John.
This morning, as markets were enjoying a relief rally, but still waiting for Beijing, the silence had been pretty deafening from Beijing and state media and Chinese officials. But the markets had basically penciled it in that we were done, we were finalized, and President Trump had reportedly signed off on it last night. And then the cold feet started to get a little colder as the silence from Beijing became more deafening. And then President Trump stirred the pot again this morning by tweeting that the reports on the trade deal, characterizing the trade deal, were incorrect, particularly on the subject of tariffs. He did not specify what kind of
how they were wrong
and what kind of mistakes were in that reporting, but futures markets, S&P 500 futures markets reacted immediately. This is not a disorderly reaction. This is a cautious posture, but certainly the morning's gains have evaporated, and investors are now twisting in the wind here, waiting for the Chinese press conference, which is going to kick off in about 20 minutes here, 15-20 minutes. And then obviously the response from the U.S. to that press conference.
And to be fair, I would even characterize the markets as they did react as they react to everything trade related, but it wasn't that big, right? It was like the markets were up 100 and something. So I don't know, right?
Yesterday. You mean yesterday with the rally?
I guess what was the rally yesterday? What did we finish?
The S&P 500 wasn't even up 1% at the end of the day. It was a good rally. It was 0.9%. Mm-hmm. It was
and it's been building
a new high. Obviously, the markets have priced in this deal, and to a great extent, the validation of those, or the what was taken to be the validation of those expectations, lifted the market a little bit further. But surely everybody on Wall Street is aware of the classic formulation of buy the rumor, sell the news. Yeah. And we've just seen these, basically for the last 12 months, we've seen positive rhetoric on the U.S. China trade front be just an inexhaustible well of upside catalyst for global risk assets, and it was just a dependable stimulus response.
Absolutely.
We could see it, and very often when you see this dynamic, particularly when it's given so much upside, is built on top of these expectations. Once the event comes to fruition, investors will take a little bit of profit, maybe take a decent amount of profit sometimes. So hence that buy the rumor, sell the news motif, which is so classic. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to sell the news yet because we don't have the news.
Right.
No, exactly.
But last time when the deal fell apart, it was very much because China at the last minute kind of pushed for more. So I suppose the market is kind of being logical and being a little hesitant. I think the U.S. has kind of put the cards on the table and say, we want this, we want to be done with it, and now we'll see whether the Chinese are happy to sign the dotted line or they're going to ask for a pound of flesh.
Well, one of the analysts this morning, I think a number of analysts have made this point that the Trump administration, by putting their version of the deal out there, they've basically put the ball into the Chinese court. And if the Chinese push for more, then the president isn't going to really have to wear that. I mean, it's not going to be good. Yep. But, the idea that the Chinese, again, reneged at the last minute, that narrative would be pretty solid, particularly given the contours of the deal as they were understood as of yesterday, which was, seemed like a pretty good...
It's true, but it's you wonder. So look, I mean, the blame game on why there isn't a China trade deal. You can play that for a long time, right? And
sure.
Like at the end of the day, it doesn't really hurt the Chinese. I mean, if Chinese either really want a deal or really don't want a deal, we all hear.
Yeah.
Everyone I talked to, I was at Council on Foreign Relations yesterday, giving a talk on trade and hearing from lots of people who are deeply involved in these discussions, and it's we hear that the Chinese really want a deal. Of course, the president says it all the time. They want it more than we do, but we're going to discount that. But no, I mean, nobody wants to see the trade fight go longer and deeper. That's why we see the market rallies every time there's some hint that that things aren't going to get worse and might get a little bit better. They're not. No one is pricing in fixing the U.S. China trade relationship.
Right.
What they're pricing in is keeping things from going worse. Right? Can we just get back to where we were at the beginning of 2018 would be really great for market
especially those December 15 potential hikes, because that's on consumer goods.
Yeah.
That would potentially have a serious negative effect on the economy.
That's right. And it seems to me that maybe the administration's tired of subsidizing farmers, so they want the Chinese to subsidize farmers instead, which is what essentially happened.
Exactly.
Will happen.
There was actually
because they'll be able to raise prices, and which, by the way, raise prices for everybody. If you have a dedicated buyer out there who's got to spend more than they ever have before on some of this stuff, you can expect to see ag prices rise.
Yeah, and one of the other things we haven't talked about, and not a lot of people are talking about, is the phase 2 and phase 3 deals.
There's not going to be a phase 2 or phase 3.
That is exactly the expectation. Is that this is really phase 1 is pretty much the over one and done kind of deal that we're going to do on the trade front. Yeah. And one of the things that we keep reminding our clients is that this is a multi-front economic confrontation between the U.S. and China. To put it bluntly, it's a lot of people down here in D.C. do characterize it as a Cold War, that as a headline grabber, sort of clickbait characterization. But there's a truth underneath that, which is the posture of the U.S. government toward China has changed pretty dramatically, and it's not just President Trump. The Democrat, it's a bipartisan issue. We've talked about that before. Yep. And the other fronts, the investment restriction front, which is located in CFIUS and
both investment restriction, so Chinese investment. And by the way, it's not just chilling Chinese investment in the United States; it's chilling investment from companies who have any kind of
it's a really important point
with Chinese. Right? So if you're a French company that happens to do a lot of business in China and you want to invest in an American firm, you're going to have heightened scrutiny.
It's a great point that I think is a little misunderstood.
And then the other part, which I think you were going to go to next, John, is also export controls, which are also affecting large multinational, globally active firms that are technologically advanced products. Are under increased scrutiny too. So we're on the risk of the United States becoming something like a roach motel, or like these are sort of, if they get more stringent, our technology production here is is a stranded asset.
Yeah.
If you can't sell it, and if you are a if you produce something in the semiconductor space in the United States, you valued assets, equity assets, right? You have to write down the value of those assets if the only companies that can buy them are American, right? If you shut out the rest of the world from being able to buy a semiconductor product, whatever it is, then you have to write down the value of those assets a little bit.
Yeah, you have to discount it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even if we don't have the same kind of trade brinksmanship, tariffs, will apply to the tariff threat, do this, China, or we will slap more tariffs on you. Our expectation, as is yours, is that that's probably a 2019 motif that is played out here. Hopefully. But still, there are plenty of institutional momentum on these other fronts. They're just going to continue to work in the background. They're less splashy. They don't grab the headlines like the big tariff fight does. But these are processes that will remain in train.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, on the I have fun with like phase one, and there's not going to be a phase two all the time. I don't mean this. The creation of a phase one and the conceptually phase one and a phase two was to say there's no chance of us doing a comprehensive agreement. And we know that will disappoint a lot of people and call it a failure. So we're not going to let them call it a failure. We're going to call it, these are the things in part one. And of course, we're going to do these other things. So it's a political rhetorical trick to prevent that kind of criticism or have an answer for that kind of criticism. I get that. The truth of the matter is that there's only ever going to be a phase one. With the economies this big, integrated, complex, lots of complexity around the relationship. The phases are, there's not going to be phase one and a phase two. There's going to be phase one, whatever we call this thing, and then negotiations forever on a whole range of
very,
things.
very specific things.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. We don't call, even if we had an agreement with the EU, all right, that doesn't mean we're going to stop having to negotiate on a whole lot of things in our relationship with the EU from now until forever. Right? That's going to happen because there are too many things. Right. There's too much complexity around the relationships. It's a dynamic economic environment, and things change.
Yeah, like a good example of that was like Visa and MasterCard allowing their networks to be in China. That's going to be a very specific issue that's negotiated. And going back to like semiconductors, if you want to buy and sell, each one of those is going to be conducted. But kind of the most fascinating part of the last year of getting to know things like this is in a town like D.C. where there's so many, there's so few bipartisan agreement. Everyone has a side. When it comes to the national security side in China, there is no left or right. There is just agreement on how we're going to deal with this, and it's.
Yeah, and the disagreement is really only on in so many cases is really only on method.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on see what comes through if we're still recording the podcast. I'm going to say on record, I'm going to stick with my view that we, downside risk on actually getting phase one. All right, I'm going to stay there until I see evidence to change it. I'm going to stick with my downside risk on that. But I do want to take literally, because I think it's all it deserves right now is like 2 minutes on the actual big trade agreement we got this week, which is
fascinating.
USMCA. The NAFTA 2. I'll always call it NAFTA 2.0, 1.1. Although, so the Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, got an agreement with Nancy Pelosi that looked from my vantage point of a lot of caving on all of the AFL-CIO.
So the unions got what they wanted.
They endorsed it.
Yeah.
Richard Trumka, the president of AFL-CIO, endorsed this trade agreement, which as a free trader has to make you skeptical. And there were a lot of it's still a lot of things around the margins, but I don't think there's any question that if President Obama had negotiated this update to NAFTA and delivered it to a Republican Congress, that it would be dead on arrival. This is a different. The calculus here is a little bit different. It's an agreement that the Democrats want to accomplish something. They know that this kind of needs to get done. They want to accomplish something to show that the other things that they're doing on impeachment and other things that they're fighting with the administration on are based on substance, not on politics.
Yes.
And so they've been saying, look, we could get a trade agreement done where we agree with the president, we can work with him. Where we disagree with him, we're going to fight him, and that gives legitimacy to these other things that they're fighting on. And it's clear that Republicans are boxed in. They're going to be very they do not feel in a political position that they can buck the president, whatever their personal views are on trade liberalization, whether they're aligned or not. If they're not aligned, you're going to hear very few voices. But Senator Toomey from Pennsylvania will be one of them who will be very critical.
Yeah.
But I think it's safe to say that Republicans are going to fall into line and support the president on this.
Yeah. This week's been kind of fascinating. You had a couple bills that kind of came out of left field, that like the surprise billing bill, which normally would be dead on arrival, like you said.
I think it's dead on arrival in the Senate.
Yeah, but it was actually a bipartisan, in the House.
And just from the market's perspective, the USMCA, there didn't seem to be a trade there. Certainly, the Canadian dollar, the Mexican peso, they were slightly up over a couple of days around those announcements, but really not that much. U.S. autos, at one point, that was supposed to be the big trade for USMCA. If it comes through, it's going to be great for the automakers in the U.S. because that wasn't really the case either. It may be modest reaction. So
because I guess if we didn't do USMCA, we just kept the existing.
Just keep existing NAFTA.
Right. Yeah. So it wasn't kind of a binary outcome.
Yeah. So the markets looked at it, but it really didn't have anything close to the kind of import and market moving potential that all the U.S. China trade lines.
It's truthfully large portions of it are very, very similar to NAFTA. Other portions of it are very, very similar, if not identical. Exact language ripped out of the TPP. So there isn't a lot new in there, and the things that are new are things that are, again, from my perspective, not improvements. There are these things like mandating certain wages in Mexico in the auto sector, the North American content. Content requirements, in order to get the tariff advantaged and quota advantaged elements of USMCA. Some of the protections for dispute resolution were taken out.
Oh, really?
And then changes in pharma. Pharma was really the big loser. Big loser in this, and so there are other things here and there, but those aren't big market moving kinds of changes, and not all that dissimilar from sort of existing.
Was the pharma part driven by the president?
No, I think it was driven by Nancy Pelosi. Look, critics are going to say that Bob Lighthizer isn't Trump's U.S. trade representative; he's Nancy Pelosi's U.S. trade representative. Because it's hard. It's hard to find the things that the speaker wanted that are not in this bill. I can't name them. I mean, I could look deeper and but nothing big.
Yeah, it's kind of a bizarro scenario where
Now, I would say, look, I mean, everybody would rather get this thing done. Yes. Like I said, the changes are, for certain industries, there are certain things I would not have sacrificed, and I hope they do not become precedent-setting in other trade agreements. The business community is supportive. We've seen supportive statements come out from the BRT and others who we support, and so I think, look, it's going to get done. That's why I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. These aren't huge changes. I think we could all breathe a sigh of relief that the North American trade relationship has been preserved, because this has been a huge, for all the critics of NAFTA. One of the things that has allowed large American manufacturers to be globally competitive has been this relationship between Mexico, United States, and Canada in rationalizing their sourcing and what they spend to produce a thing that they want to sell. Yeah. So that's been good. That's been preserved. And I will say, we used to hate. We hated the idea that there was going to be a sunset or a review in there. A lot of people were, stamping their feet over it, and I was one of them. Now I look at the review and I think, maybe come back to this in 6 years and fix some of those. See if we can fix some of those things. All right,
but here we are in mid-December, assuming the Chinese agree to this deal. We're done with USMCA. For 2020, is this it, and we're on to the election, or is there anything else you think can get done?
I don't think anything else can get done. Yeah, I really don't. But we have other things to talk about, though, like we had some central bank, modest central bank news this week. We had some big, thunderous Brexit news last night. Why don't we take a break right here and come back, and we'll decide which one we go to first. But you're listening to the HPS Macrocast, and we'll be right back.
Every 2 weeks, HPS measures U.S. adults' feelings and expectations for the economy. The Microsoft News Civic Science Economic Sentiment Index, powered by HPS, accurately measures movements in overall national economic sentiment and provides a more sophisticated alternative to existing economic sentiment indices. To learn more, contact us through HamiltonPlaceStrategies.com.
All right, back to the HPS Macrocast. John and Brendan. John, we had some Brexit news overnight.
Yes, indeed, we did. It was yesterday's general election in the UK, which was called by Prime Minister Boris Johnson as the last-ditch attempt to cement a mandate to get Brexit through into a finalized form to take the UK out of the EU. This was a bit of a nail biter, despite the fact that the polls showed a pretty consistent lead for the Conservative Party straight through, 10-point lead that fluctuated a little bit, but the questions around the accuracy of UK polling and the voting registration patterns and so forth really that always put a decent-sized question in the back of people's minds on how this would actually play out. And on the day yesterday, the Conservatives dramatically outperformed expectations. They took 364 at the last count I saw of the 650 seats in the House of Commons, the largest majority since 1987. 1987, great year. I was a freshman in high school. Versus 203 seats for Labour. That's a 47-seat pickup for the Conservatives and a decline of 59 seats for Labour. So a resounding victory. So thereby achieving clarity not only on Brexit, but also on the questions about whether the left-leaning Labour Party under firebrand Jeremy Corbyn's leadership would begin to sway the UK into a much more left-leaning kind of economic program. That was always something that was, in the background risk behind a disorderly Brexit, that it would then not only would we have disorderly Brexit, but we would have a return to socialist Britain and all of this so forth. All of those have been dispelled, and the certainty is that the mandate delivered will get us Brexit by the new deadline of January 31st. And Boris Johnson is widely assumed to be cobbling together a fiscal stimulus package. And they will immediately turn to trade deals with the EU and the U.S. President Trump alluded to a trade deal between the U.S. and U.K. in his congratulatory tweet to Boris Johnson yesterday. So the pound, which has been the traditional barometer of the fortunes of Brexit and the expectations, it's the most sensitive to all of these kind of news pieces and the great Brexit drama. The pound is up 1.3% versus the dollar. It's up 11% from its August trough. That's a big move, and it's
that would have been a good buy, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah,
it wasn't like UK was going away.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, back in August, I remember thinking, it can't go much lower, can it? Right.
And the domestic-facing, the FTSE 250, which is the much more domestic-facing equity market, is up like 4% today, whereas the more internationally focused FTSE 100, which actually gets a headwind from a stronger pound.
Right, exactly.
That's still up 1%, but the disparity of performance is pretty clear there. Interestingly enough, when you look at the gilts market, when you look at UK sovereign bonds, they're not really moving that much. And when you look at futures markets expectations for what the Bank of England is going to do, there's still pretty decent odds of a rate cut being reflected for next year. And that's not necessarily endorsing a really thumping kind of UK economy.
No, well,
in 2020.
look, I think the hard part is coming still. And actually, you mentioned the trade deals and. Certain Americans and especially the president seem focused on on getting a trade deal with the UK, which is like it's not all that important, but whatever, right?
Right.
But can we actually? My view on this, and I don't know how markets are interpreting it, and I'll go do more research on it. But it seems impossible to do to negotiate them together, right? I mean, it's obvious that the most important trade relationship with the UK is the EU. It will be, and they're going to have to sort this out. It's really complicated. Not only is it it could be really easy. It could be like, hey, we accept everything that we had been complaining about for the last 10 years, and let's sign a trade agreement, and everyone would be great with that, and it'd be quick and easy, and then be like, well, what did you Brexit for then?
Right.
I thought you wanted to make your own kinds of toasters. You didn't want, Brussels dictating the kind of toaster you make. So what were you fighting for? But they could do that, right? I mean, because maybe it really wasn't the economics that were driving this. It was culture and immigration.
It was immigration.
Those controls, right?
And certainly the election developments in Northern Ireland and Scotland, where the nationalist-leaning parties picked up seats. This was analysts are pointing to this as potentially, driving some of what Boris Johnson is going to have to confront in the coming year.
That's really the biggest story from last night, especially in Northern Ireland, where the Irish nationalists now have a majority in Parliament, which brings up the potential for future, especially also with demographics in Northern Ireland. There's much more Irish nationalists now than Protestants, where you could actually see the reunification of the country.
Yeah, and so we'll see how Prime Minister Johnson deals with that. But I'm sure for now he's nursing a sizable hangover.
I'm certain of that. Yeah, as maybe everyone is today.
But it would be pretty ironic if Boris Johnson is the man who reunites Ireland.
No hangovers at the FOMC this week, or the ECB. Both were steady as they go.
Yeah.
The only real news, I think, was Lagarde's first press conference. You were able to introduce yourself, talking in the voice of a central banker, which sounded a lot like her predecessor, central banker.
Yeah, she did a great job. I think the kind of headline-grabbing one was she said, I'm neither a hawk nor a dove, but rather I want to be a wise owl.
It's really well done.
Yeah. And then with the FOMC, Powell had a press conference. So obviously they were able to stay on hold with the good jobs done. That was widely expected. But I think Powell's kind of commentary was a little more dovish than maybe people thought. He basically said, with low inflation, we have to rethink our idea about what the level of unemployment is. Mm-hmm. So here we are at 3.5, but he said inflation's not going up, so 3.5 is probably not the low. So
and there are views as to whether, there's a limit on the number of workers on the sidelines who might be drawn in and at what price. But it just doesn't seem we can hit that yet.
Not yet, yeah. So I think both the press conferences, the market took it well. Mm-hmm. Dovish but not outrageous. It was priced in, and I'm very much looking forward to Christine Lagarde's.
Me too. I think she'll be. Look, I like Draghi, and he had his way. I'm a big fan of Lagarde. I happen to know her, right? I'm on a first name basis with her, which is kind of
pretty cool.
Fun, and but she's really talented and thoughtful, and
I think you made a really good point a few weeks ago, where she probably is the right person at the right time, because her background is a little more bureaucratic and also political, where now in Europe what we need is fiscal stimulus. So she can kind of be a champion for that rather than just a normal monetary analysis.
And just a last point on the Fed side, on the wonky front-end funding issues, the Fed announced that an additional repo facility that would inject liquidity for the year end. There have been some prominent analysts that are calling for, that are flagging the risks of another flare-up in liquidity tightness in the front-end funding markets, a place that not a lot of investors really know what is happening. And the specialists in that realm had still been wringing their hands about year-end tightness. The Fed announced an additional liquidity provision that will last through year-end and into January. That's basically almost half a trillion of liquidity on offer. So they basically came in with the big foot here to try to calm everybody down and make sure that the concerns about undersupply of funds going to year-end for the banking system would be dispelled.
And they've agreed to buy this until basically mid-year 2020. Yeah. And there are some people in the markets that are worried that they'll stop in June when they said. I mean, I think the odds of that happening, if it was going to have a negative market effect, are zero.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to take our second break here. I think we can come back, and I want to talk about little late breaking news. We have been watching, trying to pay attention to the Chinese press conference where Tony Fratto is being proven wrong in real time. Maybe. We'll see.
You never know.
We'll see. But let's take a break and come back, and then we'll talk. We'll look at ahead to next week a little bit too, and a couple of data releases this week too that we can address. You're listening to the HPS Macrocast.
Markets Policy Partners provide sophisticated financial market analysis that is independent, accessible, and actionable for a broad audience. Learn more at marketspolicy.com.
All right, we're back. So we're watching the Chinese press conference and following details as they emerge on news organizations and Twitter, and this is as clear as pea soup. It's we do know it's soup. So they say that they have the Chinese. No word from the Americans yet. The Chinese say they have agreed to an agreement. It's going to accrue. They seem to be announcing things that the United States are going to do too, which I have a feeling the Americans will have a different view on what exactly those things are. So, phased rollback of tariffs, and they talked about structural changes in both countries, and it's not clear what structural adjustments in the United States might be, but that's something they indicated. And we haven't seen any indication of anything on agriculture purchases yet.
Chinese officials have apparently mentioned that food and agricultural products are part of the deal, but they haven't specified
that $50 billion number that Trump wants. Yeah.
Okay.
Soybean futures are jumping, though. Markets have got to get ahead of this. So.
Look, they probably ought to be. I mean, it's going to happen at some point in time. I still do not believe this is it, and I don't think we're going to know by the end of the day. I do think we're not going to see tariffs over the weekend.
Right.
I think the fact that you have the Chinese coming out and saying generally positive things in public is probably enough to keep the Trump administration from executing on these tariffs that they really shouldn't want to do anyway. And then I think we're going to have to wait and see, because they're talking about a legal review on the language. We're going to have to see a substantive review. Just because they listed the categories of things that are in the agreement, we're not seeing any detail on what exactly those things are. So there's a lot to be seen, I think, the rest of the day and probably for the weeks to come.
Yeah, that sounds right.
All right. Well, we'll keep paying attention to it. And I know we'll be talking about it again next week too, for sure. Hopefully we'll have a lot more details to dive into. We had a little bit of data this week, and what do we have next week?
Yeah, kind of weak data a little this week.
Retail sales were
the retail sales is kind of the big story this today, where they were a huge miss, both on the headline, which includes gasoline and cars, kind of bulkier, but then that core, which take those out, it was only up 0.1. It was a little weird timing, where it did include a couple of the big shopping days in December. In November, but then the Cyber Monday fell into December, so it might be a bit of a timing issue. But still, not a great sign. And then with our inflation readings, they were a little lower than we thought. But next week, we get the other. So we have the consumer price index this week. Next week, we get the personal consumption expenditure index, which is the one that the Fed focuses on. So the core PCE, which they target at 2%, is only up 1.6% at this time. So going back to Powell, there's no reason for the Fed to be hiking rates because of inflation. It's below their target. We also get some of the manufacturing global PMI's Purchasing Manager Index. But other than that, it's a relatively quiet week.
All right. Well, we'll always have China.
Yes.
So we'll definitely be back next week talking about China. I hope everyone has a safe Friday the 13th,
yes,
and gets through that and go out and have a terrific weekend. Tony Fratto with Hamilton Place Strategies. John Fagan, Brendan Walsh with Markets Policy Partners, and this is the HPS Macrocast.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share. Find more from Hamilton Place Strategies at hamiltonplacestrategies.com and follow Tony Fratto on Twitter @TonyFratto. Learn more about John Fagan, Brendan Walsh, and the work they do at Markets Policy Partners by visiting marketspolicy.com.